In today's thrift store challenge, now that it is officially spring, I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to move our thrifting hacks outside. We'll be doing it with 3 different design styles in mind: neutral, eclectic, and modern. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Starting off this video with some Pottery Barn inspiration. Of course, they have really beautiful options for faux potted florals and plants in general, but they do come at a pretty hefty price tag. And living in Ohio, while there are some signs of spring coming, we are still many weeks away from being able to plant anything real and have it survive. So for the last, I would say probably 2 months, every time I've been at the Goodwill bins, I'll make it a point to kind of really try to build a collection of florals that I think would look good together in a kind of faux potted situation. So the one from HomeGoods or Marshalls was beautiful, but $79.99 is a little steep. I thought it would be maybe not the worst idea to kind of weigh the pieces separately so you guys can kind of see like about how much I spent. And I think it'd be good for me kind of too to kind of really get an idea like how much am I really even saving here. I found this bundle most recently at the Goodwill bins. Everything is $1.29 a pound for like housewares, clothes, all that kind of stuff. Glassware and books are separate, and so are like furniture items. So I've got my scale here. I don't even know if this will pick this up really, but we'll try. Not really picking it up. Let's try maybe a food scale. So after separating them, I have 4 of these total. Now, there's not like a tag on here that I can tell you guys how much or where they're from or anything like that. If I was to go out to, let's say, Hobby Lobby or Michael's and buy one of these, I feel like it would probably be like, I don't know, $12 to $15. And then of course you can use a coupon. But I think for all of these 4 florals, if I had gone to a big box store, would be at least $30. So the fact that I was at the bins and it was just a few bucks is a major savings. Another thing I found at the bins was this pot here. This is what we're going to be adding the florals to, as well as some Quikrete, just to make sure the floral arrangement stays in place. Now, glassware pieces, like I said, are weighed 49 cents a pound, I believe. So let's see how much this guy is. If you were gonna do a faux potted arrangement inside, I would recommend just using foam, so that way you would be able to reuse those florals in a different capacity. But again, because these will be going outside, I want them to be able to weather the storm. And so that is why I'm using something called Quikrete. And it's just basically a concrete mix, and you want it to be basically the consistency of like pancake batter, maybe a little bit thicker. Mix that and then go ahead and pop your florals after you've cut them down to the appropriate size. So then that way, you know, when it's outside raining or it's really windy, everything's just not gonna blow away. Once that was settled, I brought our faux potted geraniums to my sister's house and just wanted to elevate them to, again, make them look that much more high-end and luxe. And you can use anything. This was just an empty can. I flipped it upside down, placed our geraniums on top of there. Again, once end of May comes around, she can of course use this for real geraniums, but for now, I think it brings in the spring season without breaking the bank. When it comes to kind of your year-round greenery stems, I would recommend eucalyptus and olive stems because they're not really season specific. So anytime at the bins I would come across a eucalyptus garland, again over the last several months, I just kind of kept them in my stash. Same kind of deal with stems. If they had berries on them, I just picked them off, saved them for Christmas, and I just combined all of these pieces together to make a really full and lush garland, which is something that you would see at Pottery Barn, but for a small fortune. Now taking the tension rod that we used over the holiday season, but now I'm going to use a eucalyptus garland to kind of swag, again, to just help draw the eyes up, make the space feel a little bit bigger. I secured the garland to the tension rod with some zip ties, and then I just, instead, this time I put it in front of the transom just so that way you can really see it. And I think it's just so beautiful. It's such a nice thing to see when you walk into her front door. The next piece I wanted to add to this area was a lantern. So I found this one over around like Valentine's Day for just about $5. And then I also found this indoor-outdoor flameless candle for just $1.25. Just combine the 2 pieces together. This style of lantern can definitely carry her into the summer months as well, and I think it looks perfect on her front porch. Last but not least, the wreath. She was really adamant on keeping that olive wreath because, again, she doesn't like to fuss with stuff. She wants things to stay pretty consistent. This was an older DIY that I can link for you guys in the description box below. Altogether, this entire spring refresh for my sister's front porch area cost well under $30, and I think it's the perfect little minimal nod to the upcoming spring season. Now let's move along into my mom's space, who is a lover of Anthropologie. My mom loves things that feel kind of world traveled, collected. She loves a lot of color. So Anthropologie, World Market, those are resources that she definitely likes to use for inspiration. Starting off with the wreath. So I believe Anthropologie is in collaboration to some degree with Terrain. So a lot of the wreaths that you'll see on Anthropologie have this kind of wildflower or kind of collected, imperfect look to them. Grabbing this wreath here from the Christmas section, it was just $4 because I wanted that kind of grapevine situation underneath those florals. I actually kept a lot of the berries for Christmas next year, but now I'm left with this really sturdy grapevine wreath. And this was just a collection of scrap florals that I had in my stash. And the main thing here is you just want to kind of come up with a pattern and then keep repeating it until your wreath is filled in. And also just make sure that you have kind of a cohesive color palette that makes sense together. But this was essentially just $4 because all of the florals I already had and the wreath form was the only truly new purchase. Unlike my sisters, my mom doesn't have an enclosed front porch necessarily, so instead of doing a garland, I wanted to add a tree. And I almost bought this tree from the thrift store, but when I was looking on Anthropologie's website, they had a lot of different variations of fiddle leaf fig trees. And some of you might remember, again, an older DIY project when I had kind of combined two old IKEA fiddle leaf trees that were kind of small, and I made them into one large fiddle leaf tree. And because this tree was going to be going outside, I needed to make sure that it wasn't just going to blow over. So I secured it in a larger pot with cut up pool noodles and construction paper, layered several bags of rocks on top of it, and it really has stayed nice and put so far. Now I wanted to make something or place something adjacent to the fiddle leaf fig tree that was a floral option, but I could not find anything under the $50 price point that really would fit in well with her space.
I found several of these. I even left some behind because I thought there would be no way for me to go through all of them. I want to say that Bloom Room, that brand is a Joann's brand. They do say fall bushes, but these leaves look very typical rose leaves. The fact that I wanted to make a rose bush actually kind of works out really well. I think it's really just, again, in order for it to look more realistic, it has to have different kind of like variations in growth. So that's why I like, even when I'm purchasing faux stems, I like a really larger one, a smaller one, and then an even smaller one than that. I think it just makes it look more realistic. Taking some of these leaves off and adding some of these that I found. This I found for $1 at the Hartville thrift shop. I'm going to take off some of these leaves, add some of these ones I found at the bins. And again, it's just variation in size, a little bit in color, and I think it just makes it look more realistic. I'm going to do that to all 7 of these using the scrap kind of roses that I have.
Again, same situation as the geraniums, grabbing some Quikrete, mixing that together, placing our florals inside of there.
Another thing now that all of these roses are kind of in place and they're not exactly the same color, but one way to kind of unify them is to do a watercolor technique. I've actually never done this on the channel before. It's just a really subtle way to add a little bit of color without it feeling overwhelming. You obviously still want things to look pretty natural.
Placing the rose bush now in a larger cement pot that I already had, and I think this looks perfect for spring. It's the perfect amount of color, and it was so affordable. Last but not least, for my mom's space, I wanted to add some solar lanterns, and Anthropologie has these really beautiful, colorful, interesting, patterned kind of lanterns that you can place in your trees. So again, over the last several months, I collected several of these. I'm going to place these solar lights inside of them, so then that way it just really illuminates that backyard space in a really interesting and beautiful way. Other outside decorations I recommend keeping your eyes out for, both at the thrift store and at HomeGoods, are little bird feeders, bird houses, bird baths, anything bird related, you're usually good. I found this bird house at the thrift store at the Goodwill bins for under $1. It was kind of warped, so if that ever happens, just when you're cleaning it anyway, just go ahead and throw it in your tub or in a bucket of water, fill it with baking soda, and then let it dry outside, and it usually fixes the problem. Moving along now into my space, which I wanted to be more Williams-Sonoma inspired. So some of you might remember when I found this wreath at the Goodwill for just over $5, I decided to remove that blue striped ribbon there just because I felt like it leaned a little bit too summer for spring. So I then again went in my stash, grabbed all of the tulips I had. One thing I didn't love about these tulips was the leaves. So I just decided after I placed them to just kind of pick them off because I felt that they just cheapened the look of the wreath. If you've ever been to Williams-Sonoma or you've, looked at their website, a lot of the wreaths there are super full. Like that hole in the middle of the wreath is actually very small. And wreaths that look like that can cost over $100 basically every time. So one way I kind of like to get this look for a whole lot less is to grab a wreath from Home Goods, or you can make this part yourself. Grab a large wreath from the thrift store, make that part yourself, and then also add a smaller wreath on the inside to kind of stack them together for a really full look. I ended up finding this one at Home Goods for just $29.99, and then I'm going to place that one on the outside of our tulip wreath that we DIY'd. Combining the two together makes for a very full and luxe look on a budget. Moving along now into lanterns. So again, as I always do, I keep my eyes out at the thrift store for several months. And if I'm not really finding what I'm looking for, that's kind of the sign for me like, okay, this might not be something I can find at the thrift store. I might just really have to pay up for it. All of the lanterns that I found, I knew were not going to be able to tolerate the Ohio weather. So one thing about these, while they're super cute, they just are too lightweight to kind of keep outside, unfortunately. And my glass has broken now completely. So I think it's just finally time to just retire these to inside. I'm gonna just basically take the rest of the glass out at this point, I guess, unless you guys have any suggestions on how I could keep these outside and like weigh them down further, like adding like a base of like cement or something to the bottom to make them not fly away every single time. And while I definitely will not pay a Pottery Barn price or a Williams-Sonoma price, Home Goods is really good for this kind of stuff because you can find things that look almost identical for usually like a third of the price. I decided on choosing these iron ones here, so then that way there wasn't any glass should it for whatever reason tip over, but because these were so heavy duty, I know that they would stand the test of time, and they're not really season specific either. I can always jazz them up for Christmas, but definitely worth the investment. Unlike my mom's and my sister's spaces, my entry kind of just like begs for symmetry. So I knew whatever I was going to need to make or find, I would have to find two of. So when I found these that were just $34.99 a piece, I thought that was a pretty fair price point. Decided to lift them again just to make them feel a little bit more luxe. And one hack I like to do, again, landscaping hack just to make your space look more expensive, is to add some solar lights inside of there. I'll link these. These are from Amazon, and it just makes it look, it gives it that kind of resort-like vibe, but without breaking the bank. When it comes to decorative doormats, I would say that the thrift store, usually what you'll find is pretty much like indoor rugs. I've never really seen an outdoor rug that I would even remotely consider because it's usually really faded or damaged in some way. So I think Home Goods is better for this kind of stuff because you can buy it brand new. Obviously, these are not meant to last a lifetime, so you don't want to break the bank doing so, but I ended up finding this one here that didn't have a price tag, so they gave it to me for about 20 bucks, and it's a nice way to just add a little bit of pattern onto my front porch styling. And that really wraps it up for today's video. I did want to say a quick thank you to all of you who submitted your wonderful comments in last week's video. I'm going to place the winners of those gift cards on the screen now. And again, just wanted to thank you all so much for all the love and support on this channel. With all that said, I hope you all have an amazing week, and I will see you guys back here next Sunday. Bye for now.